The cowboy waited for a mail-order bride, but identical twins stepped off the wagon. Elia's cane reached the landing station early, like he always did when something mattered. On Red Mesa 7, people measured life by routine. The sun rose, the dust moved, the windmills turned, and a rancher did his work. Elias was not the loud kind of man. He did not argue in the saloon. He did not brag at the trading post. He fixed what broke, he fed what depended on him, and he kept his word. That was why he stood there now, hands resting on his belt, eyes on the long road that led to the station platform. The station was not fancy. It was just a metal porch built beside the hoverwagon lane, with a fuel pump, an old signal pole, and a shade roof patched with solar cloth. Around it stretched the open frontier, red dirt, dry grass, and rock ridges that looked like broken teeth. Above, the sky held two pale suns. They made the world bright but not warm. A small crowd gathered as the hour grew near. On Red Mesa 7, a new arrival was rare enough to become an event. Two ranchers leaned against crates and whispered. A shopkeeper's son climbed on a barrel so he could see better. The colony's postmaster, Mrs. Della Ward, tapped her data slate like it might hurry the wagon along. Elias tried not to look nervous, but his jaw stayed tight. He had signed up for the Interstellar Match and Relocation Program 8 months ago. People called it mail-order, like the old stories from Earth, but out here it was more practical than romantic. The colony needed families, teachers, farmers, people who could stay. The agency promised careful matching, background checks, and secure passage. Elias had never imagined he would do something like it. He had resisted at first. His ranch kept him busy. His automated fences, his water lines, his herd of gene-tuned cattle, everything demanded attention. But late nights had a way of making a man honest. When the wind howled outside and the house felt too big for one person, Elias sometimes found himself staring at the empty chair across from him. His neighbor, Hank Mercer, had finally said, "You can't rope the whole world alone, Kane. A ranch ain't meant to be run by a ghost." Elias had grunted, but the words stayed with him. The next week he visited the colony office and filled out the forms. He kept the answers simple: steady job, stable land, no debts, no trouble. When the agency sent him a match profile, he read it 3 times. Her name was Lyra. The file said she was calm, practical, and used to frontier life. She wanted a quiet place. She wanted a fresh start. Elias felt a strange hope he had not allowed himself in years. Now he waited. A horn sounded in the distance. The crowd stirred. Dust rose on the lane as a long hover wagon glided toward the platform. It rode a handspan above the ground, its anti-grav humming low like a giant insect. A cargo trailer followed behind, carrying crates and supplies for the colony. Elias' stomach tightened. The hover wagon slowed, then stopped. Its side door hissed open. The driver, a broad woman in a dusty jacket, stepped down first. She nodded at Mrs. Ward and handed over a sealed bag of station mail. Then she looked at Elias with a sharp, measuring glance. "You the groom?" she asked. Elias cleared his throat. "Yes, ma'am." "Well," she said and stepped aside. 2 women came out. At first Elias thought he was seeing double because of the bright suns. They both had the same face, same pale hair tied back, same steady gray eyes. Same calm expression, like they had practiced it. They wore matching travel cloaks, both dust-stained at the hem. Each carried a small case in one hand. The crowd went quiet. Even the wind seemed to pause. The women stepped down together, boots hitting metal in the same rhythm. They looked at Elias, then at each other, then back at him. One spoke first. "Elias Kane." Elias swallowed. "That's me." "I'm Lyra," she said. The other woman nodded. "And I'm Leora." Elias stared. He managed. The file, it said Lyra. Lyra's mouth tightened just slightly. "It did." Leora's voice was gentle but firm. "There has been confusion." Mrs. Ward stepped forward, eyes wide. "Confusion? What kind?" Lyra kept her gaze on Elias. "The program listed us as a joint relocation. Both names were attached. We did not know you were expecting one." Elias felt heat in his cheeks, not anger, just shock. People were watching him like a stage play was happening. He heard a few murmurs ripple through the crowd. Hank Mercer let out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be—" Elias wanted to disappear, but he forced himself to breathe. He had been raised with one rule: you do not leave people stranded, especially not on a harsh world like this. He looked at the twins because that was what they were, not similar, identical. He saw something behind their calm faces, something like exhaustion and caution. "You got somewhere to go?" he asked. Lyra shook her head once. No, Leora answered softly. We were told this was safe. Elia's shoulders loosened. Then you'll come with me at least until we sort this out. Mrs. Ward blinked. Elia's the agency. I'll speak to them, Elia said. Later. He picked up one of their cases without asking, careful not to startle them. The case was heavier than it looked. That small detail settled in his mind like a stone. They walked toward his ranch truck, an old crawler with wide tires and a cracked windshield. The twins moved close together, matching strides, watching the people watching them. As Elias drove away, the colony faded behind them. The road was a red ribbon through dry grass and scattered rocks. In the distance, the ranch's solar towers rose like thin black trees. For a while, nobody spoke. The engine hummed. Wind tapped the glass. Elias kept his eyes on the road, but he could feel the twins studying everything, the horizon, the fence line, the sky. Finally, Elias said, So, you two signed up together? Lyra answered, Yes. Why? Silence filled the cab again. Leora turned her head slightly, looking out at the open land. Because we don't separate, she said. Elias nodded like he understood, though he didn't. He only knew it sounded like a rule made from fear. When they reached the ranch, the main house sat low and sturdy, built of reinforced panels and old wood shipped from another colony. A porch wrapped around the front. A windmill turned slowly near the water tank. Beyond that, robotic cattle grazed in a wide field, their tags blinking blue. Lyra stepped down from the truck and scanned the property. Her eyes moved with purpose, fence corners, ridge lines, blind spots. Leora watched the herd, head tilted as if listening. Elias noticed both things and felt uneasy. Still, he forced himself to act normal. This is it, he said. Not much, but it runs. It's beautiful, Leora said, and her voice sounded honest. Elias led them inside. The house smelled of coffee, metal tools, and sun-baked dust. There were 2 bedrooms besides his. One was used for storage, the other held a narrow guest bed. Elias rubbed the back of his neck. You can take the guest room, he said, and I'll clear the storage room. It won't take long. Lyra looked at him steadily. We can share. Elias froze, then remembered himself. I meant you can choose whatever's comfortable. Leora gave a small smile. Thank you. Elias went to the kitchen and poured water into 3 cups. When he returned, he saw Lyra standing near the window, staring out toward the far fence. Leora was by the table, fingertips resting lightly on the wood like she was feeling the grain. You hungry? Elias asked. Leora nodded. A little. He pulled out dried meat strips, biscuits, and a jar of preserved fruit. Simple food, safe food, the kind that lasted. They ate quietly. The twins were polite, but Elias noticed how they listened between sounds, like they expected trouble to come knocking. After the meal, Elias went to the comm console. He keyed in the agency channel and waited. The screen flickered, then displayed a message. Connection delay, core network congested. He tried again, same result. Mrs. Ward would have known this. Storms and solar flares often slowed communication, but this was bigger than a lost crate of mail. Elias clenched his jaw. He turned to the twins. I can't reach them yet, might be hours, might be days. Lyra did not look surprised. We assumed that. Assumed, Elias repeated. Leora looked down at her hands. Out here nothing moves fast, she said. We know. Elias studied them. Their calm was too practiced. Their answers were careful. He did not like the feeling in his gut, but he did not want to accuse them of anything. Not without proof, not without reason. Outside, a faint beep sounded. Elias stepped onto the porch and looked toward the fence line. His perimeter sensor light blinked once, then twice. He walked down the steps and followed the path to the control post. The display showed a brief contact, small, fast, then gone. A stray predator, maybe, or a delivery drone off course. But as he looked across the open field, he saw something glitter for a second near the ridge. Not sunlight, not rock, metal. Elias narrowed his eyes. Behind him, the porch door creaked. Lyra stood there, her gaze locked on the same ridge. Was that your sensor? She asked. Elias hesitated. Yeah, probably nothing. Lyra's voice stayed calm, but her shoulders were tight. On your world, she said, what does probably usually mean? Elias did not answer right away. He watched the ridge until the glitter vanished. Then he said, it means we keep our eyes open. Lyra nodded once, like that was the right response. Inside, Leora waited by the table, her expression gentle but alert. Elias realized, with a slow chill, that the twins were not just running from loneliness or looking for a fresh start. They were hiding, and whatever they were hiding from had found the edge of his land the very first day they arrived. Morning came slowly over Red Mesa 7. The twin suns rose at different angles, painting long shadows across the ranch. Elia's cane was already awake before the light reached the porch. Habit pulled him from sleep. Ranch work never waited, and neither did trouble. He stepped outside with a mug of coffee in hand. The air felt cooler than usual, carrying a dry scent that hinted at a coming windstorm. He walked toward the fence controls, checking the perimeter logs. The sensor alert from the night before blinked on the screen. One unknown contact, fast movement, no clear ID. Elias frowned. Stray drones were rare this far from the main colony. He adjusted the sensor sensitivity and scanned the horizon again. Nothing moved except grazing cattle and drifting dust. Behind him, the door opened softly. Leora stepped onto the porch. She wore one of Elia's spare jackets, sleeves slightly too long for her arms. She watched the open fields with quiet interest. "You wake early," she said gently. "Ranch doesn't run itself," Elias replied. He nodded toward the fields. "You sleep all right?" She gave a small nod. "Better than expected." A moment later, Lyra joined them. Her hair was tied back tightly, her eyes already sharp and alert. She looked toward the ridge where Elias had seen the metallic flash the night before. "Did you check the sensors again?" she asked. Elias raised an eyebrow. "Already done?" Lyra seemed satisfied but not relaxed. Elias noticed how she stood, balanced, ready like someone trained to react quickly. It was not the stance of a simple traveler. He decided not to push. Instead, he said, "You two want to see how things work around here." Leora's face brightened slightly. "Yes." They walked across the yard together. Elias explained the solar pumps, the automated feeders, and the drone towers that monitored the cattle. Leora listened carefully, asking thoughtful questions about the animals. Lyra focused more on the technology, how old it was, how often it broke, how secure the system might be. "You run all this alone?" Lyra asked. "Mostly," Elias said. "Neighbors help when storms hit." She nodded like she was storing the information away. As they reached the far pasture, a small repair drone hovered low, struggling to maintain balance. One of its stabilizers sparked weakly. Lyra stepped forward immediately. "May I?" Elias hesitated only a second before nodding. She crouched beside the drone, opening a panel with confident movements. Her fingers moved fast, precise. Within minutes, the drone stabilized, its hum smoothing into a steady tone. Elias stared. "That usually takes me half an hour." Lyra shrugged slightly. "I've fixed worse." Leora smiled faintly. "She has." Elias felt curiosity growing stronger, but he kept his voice calm. "Well, I won't complain about faster repairs." They continued working through the morning. Leora helped guide the cattle using calm gestures and soft sounds that seemed to soothe the animals. Even the more stubborn ones followed her without resistance. By midday, Elias realized something strange. The ranch felt different, lighter, like it had more life in it. They returned to the house for lunch. As Elias prepared simple food, the comm console beeped again. He hurried over, hoping the agency had responded. Instead, a colony-wide message appeared. Unidentified visitors arrived at trading post. Report any suspicious activity. Elias' stomach tightened. Lyra read the message over his shoulder. Her expression remained calm, but Elias saw a flicker of tension in her eyes. "Could be traders," he said. "Yes," she replied quietly. "It could." That afternoon, Elias needed supplies from town. He hesitated before inviting the twins, unsure if they wanted to be seen. Leora agreed to come. Lyra chose to stay behind, saying she wanted to finish checking the ranch systems. The trading post buzzed with activity when they arrived. Two unfamiliar ships stood near the landing area, sleek, dark vessels that looked too advanced for a simple frontier colony. Several strangers walked among the locals, dressed like travelers but moving with coordinated awareness. Elias noticed immediately. One of the strangers glanced toward Leora. The look lasted only a moment, but it was enough. Leora stiffened beside him. "Do you know them?" Elias murmured. She shook her head quickly. "No," but her voice was tight. They finished their errands quickly. Elias felt eyes on his back the entire time. As they returned to the truck, one of the strangers stepped slightly closer, pretending to inspect a crate while clearly observing them. Elias opened the truck door and helped Leora inside without comment. He drove away slowly, resisting the urge to speed. Halfway home, he spoke. "You don't have to tell me everything, but if trouble's coming to my land, I need to know." Leora stared out the window for a long moment. We hoped it would take longer for them to find us, she said quietly. Elia's hands tightened on the wheel. Them, she hesitated, people who believe we belong to them. Elias felt anger rise in his chest. Nobody belongs to anyone out here. Leora looked at him, surprise and relief mixing in her eyes. When they reached the ranch, Lyra was waiting on the porch. She already looked tense. They're here, she said simply. Elias nodded. I figured. Lyra stepped closer. We didn't want to bring danger to you. You didn't, Elias said firmly. Danger shows up whether invited or not. The twins exchanged a glance that felt like a silent conversation. Elias noticed again how connected they seemed, moving almost in sync. That evening they sat around the table. The mood was quieter, heavier. Lyra finally spoke. We worked for a corporation in the core systems. They trained us together, used us for strategy and data analysis. They didn't expect us to leave. Elias listened without interrupting. We escaped, Leora added softly. We entered the relocation program to disappear somewhere quiet. Elias exhaled slowly. And now they want you back. Lyra nodded once. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the porch rails. Elias leaned back in his chair, thinking. He had chosen this life for freedom, no bosses. No rules except survival and honesty. Finally, he said, then we make sure they don't take you. The twins stared at him. You don't even know us, Lyra said. Elias met her gaze calmly. I know enough. You worked hard today. You helped without being asked. And you didn't lie when it mattered. Silence filled the room, but it felt warmer than before. Later that night, Elias walked the perimeter again. The sky darkened into deep blue, stars appearing slowly. His sensors showed distant movement near the ridge again, faint signals, too precise to be random. He stood there for a long time, watching. Behind him, footsteps approached. Both twins joined him quietly. Together, they looked toward the horizon where danger waited beyond sight. Leora spoke softly. Are you afraid? Elias considered the question. A little, he admitted, but fear keeps a man sharp. Lyra nodded. Then we stay sharp together. Elias felt something shift inside him, a sense that the lonely ranch had become something more. Not just land to protect, but people worth standing beside. Far away, a small drone hovered above the ridge, recording their silhouettes against the twin suns as they set. None of them noticed it slip away into the darkening sky. The next day felt too quiet. That was what bothered Elias most. On Red Mesa 7, wind and dust were normal, cattle noises were normal, machines clicking and humming were normal. But the kind of quiet that came before people knocked on your door with a lie in their mouth, that quiet was different. Elias spent the morning reinforcing the ranch the old frontier way, just with newer tools. He checked the solar fence strength, tightened the hinges on the barn doors, and recalibrated the motion sensors so they would not miss small drones. Lyra worked beside him without wasting words. She opened panels, rerouted cables, and wrote short code lines into the ranch system like it was second nature. Every time Elias watched her hands move, he understood a little more. She was not just good with tools. She had been built for this life of pressure and decisions. Leora focused on the living things. She moved through the pasture with calm confidence, settling the herd closer to the barn so they would not scatter if something startled them. She also spoke with the neighbor kids who had wandered over, curious about the new faces. She gave them small tasks, carry water, pick up loose boards, close gates, and made it feel like a game. Elias noticed how quickly the ranch stopped feeling like a lonely place and started feeling like a small community. Around midday, a dust line appeared on the far road. Elias saw it first. He shaded his eyes and watched the shape grow clearer. A crawler truck, long and dark, moving steady, not a rancher's vehicle. Too clean, too quiet. It stopped at the front gate without crossing the fence line. Lyra's shoulders tightened. That's them. Elias did not panic. He simply walked to the gate post and placed a hand on the release controls, but did not open it. He stood straight, facing the road. Two people stepped out of the crawler. They wore travel coats and simple hats like any traders. But their boots were polished and they moved with smooth discipline. A third person stayed in the driver's seat, engine idling low. One of the strangers raised a hand in a friendly gesture. Afternoon, we're looking for two women, sisters. They may have come through the colony station yesterday. Elias kept his voice even. Plenty of people pass through. Who are you? The stranger smiled politely. Just private retrieval contractors. Their family is worried. We want to return them safely. Lyra and Leora had stayed behind the porch railing, partly hidden by shadow. Elias could feel them watching. He did not look back. He kept his eyes on the stranger's face. "Family," Elias repeated. "You got papers." The stranger reached into his coat and produced a digital badge. Elias took one glance and felt a cold weight in his stomach. The badge looked official at first, but the colony seal was slightly wrong. A tiny detail. But on the frontier, tiny details were how people survived. Elias handed it back. "Looks fake." The second stranger's smile faded for a moment, then returned. "Sir, we don't want trouble. We're offering a reward for cooperation." Elias leaned his forearms on the gate post. "I'm not for sale." The stranger sighed like Elias was being difficult. "Then you don't understand what's at stake. Those two are under contract." Elias' eyes hardened. "People aren't cargo." "Not people," the stranger said, voice sharpening. "Assets." That single word snapped something inside Elias. His calm became steel. "I'll say this once," Elias replied. "Turn around and leave." The strangers exchanged a look. Then the first one spoke again, softer, like he was giving advice. "We could also speak to the colony council. Harboring runaways is a serious offense." Elias nodded slightly. "Go ahead." The strangers stared at him a moment longer. Then slowly they returned to their crawler and drove away, leaving only the dust line behind. Elias exhaled. Only when the vehicle was gone did he turn toward the porch. Lyra stepped forward. "They're testing you," she said. "They already tested me," Elias replied. "They failed." Leora's voice was quiet. "They won't stop." Elias looked across his land, then back to the twins. "Then we get ahead of them." That evening, Elias drove to the colony council hall. It was a simple building with reinforced walls and a satellite dish on top. Inside, a few council members sat around a table with worn chairs. Hank Mercer was there too, arms crossed, listening. Elias told them the truth as plainly as possible. Strangers had come, claiming ownership of 2 women on his property. He explained the fake badge. He did not share every secret the twins had told him, but he shared enough to make one point clear. "They're not criminals," Elias said. "They're being hunted." The council members looked uneasy. One said, "We don't have the power to fight a core world corporation." Hank leaned forward. "We do have power, frontier law, and we do have something they don't have." "And what's that?" the councilwoman asked. Hank pointed at Elias. "Stubbornness." Elias kept his face calm, but he felt gratitude in his chest. After a long discussion, the council agreed to file a formal report under colonial protection rules. If the strangers returned, they would be questioned and recorded. The council also agreed to send a warning to nearby settlements, asking for support if needed. On the way back, Elias felt both relieved and worried. Paper rules helped, but paper could be torn. Out here, protection meant people standing together when it mattered. When Elias returned to the ranch, Lyra and Leora were waiting at the porch steps. A lantern glowed beside them. The wind had died down and the night sky was full of stars. Lyra spoke first. "We need to tell you something else." Elias nodded. "Go on." Lyra took a breath. "We have a link between our minds. It's not magic, it's engineered. We can share thoughts fast, coordinate, predict patterns together." Elias did not look shocked. It explained too much, the matching steps, the shared glances, the way they moved like one team. Leora added, "The corporation used it. They made us valuable. They also made us easy to track because our systems have signatures." Elias rubbed his jaw. "So they can find you." Lyra nodded. "If they get close enough." Elias looked toward the dark ridge in the distance. "Then we keep them far enough away." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "You're still willing to do this?" Elias answered simply, "Yes." Leora's expression softened. "Why?" Elias paused. The honest answer was not complicated. "Because I know what it feels like to be alone, and I know what it feels like to want a clean start." They stood there quietly for a moment. Then Lyra reached into her pocket and placed a small device on the porch rail. It looked like a coin, but it had a faint pulse of light. "What's that?" Elias asked. "A tracker beacon," Lyra said. "We found one in the wagon luggage. It was hidden." Elias' stomach dropped. "So they were already tracking you before they came to the gate." Lyra nodded. "Which means the next move won't be polite." Elias stared at the small device, then looked out into the night. The ranch felt different now, not because it was less safe, but because Elias understood the truth. This was not a simple problem. It was a hunt. And he was no longer just protecting land. He was protecting people. Part 4. They could hide ships, erase tracks, and cut signals. They could turn a wide open plain into a maze where even sensors struggled. Elias read the warning twice, then looked at Lyra and Leora across the kitchen table. They'll use the storm, Elias said. Lyra nodded. So will we. Elias liked the way she said that, not like a threat, but like a plan. They worked fast. Lyra pulled the tracker beacon apart, studying it like a puzzle. She isolated the power source and signal emitter. Then she smiled slightly for the first time since arriving. We can make it lie, she said. Elias watched as she rewired it, then placed it inside an old supply crate. Leora helped seal the crate and load it onto a small cargo sled. Elias hooked the sled to a ranch drone and programmed a route toward the western canyon, far from the ranch house. You sure this will work? Elias asked. It won't fool them forever, Lyra replied, but it will force them to move where we want them. Elias nodded. He understood ranch tactics. If a predator was coming, you didn't wait by the barn and hope. You guided it away from the weak spots and into a place where it could not move easily. As the day went on, the sky turned dull. Dust clouds gathered on the horizon. The wind picked up, pushing sand across the ground like flowing water. Elias checked the colony channel again and saw new updates. The strangers had returned to the trading post. They were asking questions. They were offering money. They were making threats without saying the words. By late afternoon, the sandstorm arrived. It hit like a moving mountain. Visibility dropped to a few yards. The world became a roaring blur of grit and noise. Elias pulled down the storm shutters and sealed the house vents. The ranch system switched to storm mode, locking gates and lowering power usage. Inside, the lamps dimmed as solar intake vanished behind the dust. Then the ranch perimeter sensor chirped. Elias' body went still. They're here. Lyra closed her eyes for half a second, listening to something Elias could not hear. They're following the beacon, she said. Not directly at us. They're going toward the canyon path. Elias exhaled slowly. Good, that means the bait worked. Leora looked worried. But they might still search here. Not if we move smart, Elias said. He opened a hidden floor panel near the storage room and pulled out an old emergency kit, respirators, goggles, heat blankets, and 2 compact signal flares, not weapons, frontier survival tools. He handed gear to the twins. We're going out in that? Leora asked. We're going where the storm helps us, Elias replied. They left the ranch through the side exit and moved along the fence line, staying low where the wind break was stronger. Elias knew the land like a map in his bones. He guided them toward an old mining trench that ran toward the canyon. It was mostly forgotten now, but it still offered shelter from the worst of the storm. As they moved, Lyra and Leora stayed close, their heads turning in small synchronized motions. Elias could tell they were communicating through their link, sharing angles, sounds, tiny shifts in the wind that might hide an engine hum. Halfway to the canyon, they saw lights through the dust, faint white moving in a pattern, a search team. Elias held up a hand and they froze. He led them down into the trench, pressing against the wall. The lights moved closer, then paused. Elias held his breath. Sand poured over the trench edge, whispering like rain. The lights drifted past. When they were gone, Leora released a shaky breath. Elias touched her shoulder lightly, steadying her. You're doing fine, he said. Leora nodded, eyes wide but determined. I'm not scared of storms, she whispered. I'm scared of cages. Elias' voice stayed firm. No cages here. They reached the canyon mouth as the storm thickened. The canyon walls rose like dark giants, blocking wind and giving them clearer sound. Elias spotted the drone carrying the beacon crate in the distance, resting near a rock outcrop exactly where he had programmed it. Lyra crouched behind a boulder and peeked around the edge. Their crawler is coming, she said. Elias looked down the canyon path. A low engine hum grew louder. Then the dark crawler appeared, moving carefully. Behind it, a smaller hover scout followed, its lights cutting through dust. The strangers stepped out again, now wearing storm masks. They moved with confidence like they believed the canyon belonged to them. One of them held a handheld scanner following the beacon's signal. They think we're here, Leora whispered. They think you're here, Elias corrected. They think I'm just land. Lyra's eyes narrowed. We can use that. Elias nodded once. He pointed at a narrow side passage Elias knew led to a dead end. If we draw them deeper, their signal weakens and their vehicles can't turn fast. Lyra looked at the canyon walls, then at the dust patterns in the air. And we can trigger a minor rock slide, she said quietly. Elias blinked. We're not burying anyone. We won't, Lyra replied. Just blocking the exit for a few minutes, enough for the council drones to arrive. Elias had already sent a silent ping to Hank and the council before leaving the ranch. If the message got through, help would be coming, if the storm didn't swallow the signal. Lyra pulled out a small tool from her pocket and tapped a short command into it. She tossed a palm-sized device toward a weak section of the canyon wall. It stuck like glue and began to vibrate. Elias watched, tense. "That's safe," Lyra nodded. "Controlled." The strangers reached the beacon crate. One of them opened it quickly, then froze. He looked confused. He lifted the beacon and stared at it, realizing too late that it was not attached to a person. "That's not them," one said sharply. The scanner operator turned, sweeping the device. The signal jumped, because Lyra had rerouted it again, bouncing it off the canyon wall so it seemed like the twins were moving deeper inside. The strangers hurried forward, following the false trail. Elias moved first, stepping into the open just long enough to be seen. He made sure the wind carried his silhouette clearly. "Hey!" he called. The strangers snapped their attention toward him. For a moment they hesitated, surprised. Elias did not run right away. He waited until they took the bait. Then he turned and led them down the side passage. Lyra and Leora stayed hidden, watching from behind rocks. Their job was not to fight. Their job was to survive and to prove the truth. The strangers followed Elias deeper until the side passage narrowed. Then Lyra triggered her device. A low rumble shook the canyon. Sand and small rocks fell from above, blocking the entrance behind the strangers' crawler. Not a collapse, not a crush, just a heavy wall of debris. The strangers were trapped in the passage for the moment, engines whining as they tried to reverse. Elias stood at a distance, safe behind a curve, shouting through the canyon. "This is frontier territory. You're being recorded. The council is on the way." The strangers cursed, their comm breaking. One lifted a comm device, trying to call their ship. But the storm interference scrambled the signal. Then through the dust, a new sound arrived, multiple drone motors, high and steady. Colony Council drones appeared at the canyon mouth, their cameras flashing. Hank Mercer's voice echoed from a speaker unit. "Elias." "You in one piece?" Elias let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. "I'm here." The drones hovered closer, projecting bright light onto the trapped strangers and recording every word, every move. The council had come, not with force, but with proof. Lyra and Leora stepped out from behind the rocks, hands visible, faces calm. Leora's eyes were wet, but she held her head high. Lyra's expression was cool and steady. Hank's voice came again. "You folks claim you own people." One of the strangers tried to regain control, speaking loudly. "We are authorized." "Authorized by who?" Hank snapped. "Because frontier law says you don't get to drag anyone off-world without proper court review, and you sure don't do it with fake documents." The stranger fell silent. Cameras don't argue, they record. By the time the storm began to weaken, the council had escorted the strangers back to the colony for questioning. Their ship was placed under hold until proper verification could be received from neutral authorities. Elias returned to the ranch that night with the twins. The house felt warm despite the storm dust still clinging to the walls. Elias made coffee again like he always did after a hard day. Small rituals mattered. Leora sat at the table, hands wrapped around her cup. "Do you think it's over?" she asked. Elias shook his head. "Not forever, but for now they won't move without eyes on them." Lyra stared at the window, watching the last of the storm drift away. "We never thought anyone would stand with us," she said quietly. Elias leaned back in his chair. "You picked the wrong ranch if you wanted a man who backs down." Leora let out a small laugh, the sound thin but real. It was the first laugh in the house. The next morning, sunlight returned. The twin suns rose clean and bright, lighting the red plains and the repaired fences. The cattle grazed as if nothing had happened. The windmills turned. The ranch drones resumed normal routes. Elias stepped onto the porch and looked over his land. Lyra stood beside him, arms folded, calmer now. Leora joined them, a blanket around her shoulders. Out on the sky lane, a cargo wagon passed high above, gliding toward the distant colony. Its shadow moved over the ranch like a slow wave. Elias didn't know what the future would bring. But he knew one thing: the ranch was no longer silent. And when danger came again, it would not find a lonely man waiting. It would find a home that stood together.